Okay, so let's get into the perfect jumper. And obviously, this is all about developing that really pro-ready shooting stroke that attracts coaches and scouts. Because as we all know, the number one thing that they're looking for these days is shooters. These are the most in-demand players in the world. And when you can become a shooter, you can play at any level. So there's really four things that we're going to talk about in this video, and they're extremely important to understand the concepts first of all, and then the mechanics of the actual shot. So these are efficiency and consistency, the line of precision, which is a concept that we'll talk about in a minute, top follows bottom, which is another concept, and then of course your mechanics from your feet to your hips to your shoulders, your elbow, your release, all that kind of stuff last is what we're going to talk about. So first of all, let's get into the really efficiency and consistency, because this is what can really make or break your jump shooting ability in games, okay? And the first thing that you want to do with any jump shot is recreate what we call exact matches. And these are shots that what can be done once whenever you can take a jump shot and, make it from any range on the court. If you can do that once, you can do it again and again, as long as you do it the exact same way. So this is where mechanics come into play, okay? When your mechanics are perfect, when you've drilled them home into your body using the correct training program, which you have, you will be able to literally recreate exact matches every single time, and it then becomes possible to, make 50, 100, 150, 200 shots in a row during training, because you literally shoot the exact same way every single time and get the same result again and again. So this is the importance of mechanics. Now, the other reason we need to focus on efficiency and consistency in our mechanics is because you really start to fault under fatigue. If you have poor form, if your mechanics are off or if they're different each time, anytime you're under fatigue, in the fourth quarter when it really counts, your form is going to get worse and worse and worse. And this is what happens when, you have bad mechanics and, you're not getting as much power from your legs and you start missing shots down the stretch. You don't want that. So what you have to do is become very efficient and consistent in your mechanics, and that's what we're going to do. So to do this, you need to develop what we call the line of precision. And this is the most direct, efficient flow of power from the ground into the ball. So when you put force into the ground, when you jump on your shot, all that power is generated from your feet up into the ball, and you want it to be efficient without any power leaks. So to do this, every single shot has to use the mechanics that create that direct line of precision. And when that line of precision is broken, you lose power, you lose range, you lose speed on your release, and overall your shot just becomes a lot weaker. So you don't want that. You want a direct line of precision, a straight line from your feet, which we call your power foot, which is basically the same side foot that you're shooting on. So if you're right-handed, your right foot is your power foot. You want a straight line from your right foot, your right knee, your right hip, your right shoulder, your right elbow, and your right hand, all the way from the ground up, as you can see in that photo, is a direct line of precision. It's straight, and it's straight through the ground into the ball towards the hoop. Now, to do this, you need to understand a very important concept, which is top follows bottom. Okay, the joint above will always follow the joint below. So this is obviously your hips will follow your feet, your shoulders will follow your hips, your arms will follow your shoulders, your hand will follow the elbow, and the ball follows the hand. Now, you need to understand that if the joint above is off, it's because the joint below was off first. So let's say, for example, your feet aren't square to the basket. They're facing to the left of the basket. Your hips are then going to be moved obviously to the left of the basket with the feet, and the ball it's just going to continue up the chain, and the ball is going to be directed to the left of the hoop. So if your feet are pointing that way, you're obviously going to be shooting the ball that way, right? So you have to get each joint in the chain perfect, and there can't be any missing links. That's the importance of this. You can't be missing at any specific joint. You have to be perfect from the feet to the hips, to the shoulders, and all the way up the chain and into the ball. Now, another thing to understand is that it all starts with the feet. So that's what I want to get into first with really constructing your perfect mechanics, right? So Your feet come first, then your knees, then your hips, then your shoulders, then your elbow, then your release, your eyes, and your neck. So this is really in order of importance because, again, it all starts with the feet. The joint above will follow the joint below. If you get the first joint right, the odds are the next joint is going to be square, then the next joint is going to be square, and your whole body is going to be square and pointing at the hoop. So let's obviously first get into the feet. And this is the most common mistake in shooting. You not squaring your feet to the basket is the most common mistake because there's some very, very misinformed coaches out there that are actually teaching you to not square your feet to the basket. And that is one of the biggest mistakes you can ever make because, again, you can't recreate exact matches when you don't have an exact angle. So if you have all 10 toes pointing to the basket, you're always going to be square, okay? The joint above is square, your hips are going to follow the feet, again, your shoulders will follow the hips, and everything up the chain will be pointing at the basket. But when you don't point your feet the right way, it's very, very difficult to get your feet at the same angle every time. You can't recreate exact matches, and you have to twist your spine to then get your hips and shoulders correct, and it really is a huge energy leak. And I have no idea where these coaches got the idea that that was a good idea, but they are severely misinformed, and if you continue following their advice, your shot will be compromised, okay? I used to follow that advice until I actually met someone when I was 15 years old who set me straight, and my shot at that point really started moving forward and getting a lot better. But I can tell you that I've talked with some of the best shooting coaches in the world at the 5-star shooting camp, and none of them recommended not squaring up your feet. You always have to square up your feet to the basket, and if you don't do this, you will be sacrificing shooting percentages. That's the bottom line, okay? So I know I'm going to get some emails from people pointing me to that YouTube video, that coach that's become kind of popular, pointing your feet to the left or whatever, but that is a huge mistake, and you should not be doing that if you are going to be a great shooter. Now, you have to know that it's going to feel a little weird to begin, okay? That's obvious. The first day, the first 2 days, the first 3 days, you're, going to be kind of getting used to it. But once you get used to squaring up your feet to the basket, your shot is going to be so much more consistent, and you're going to be making a lot more shots. So how do we do that? First of all, you need to get your feet shoulder width or slightly inside. This is more of a comfort thing. I like my feet roughly shoulder width, as you can see, but if you want them slightly inside, that's okay. Just make sure you have a really balanced base of support, and you want to be on the balls of your feet, obviously, but not too far on the balls of your feet. Just an athletic, bouncy stance, and get a lot of rhythm to your jump shot. So your feet are kind of in rhythm, they're square to the basket, you're on your balls of your feet, really athletic, and with one foot just slightly in front, okay? This is because your elbow, when it's up at when you're in the shooting pocket, your elbow is in front as well, so it gives your elbow a little bit more of a base of power to draw from if that one foot is slightly in front. So maybe an inch, half an inch in front is a good idea, but again, all 10 toes toward the hoop. That's critical, and you have to do that if you want to become a great shooter. Next is the knees, and again, they're going to follow the feet, so if your feet are squared up, you're going to be able to hopefully your knees will follow your feet unless you're terribly weak in your lower body. At that point, you got to strengthen the lower body. But one of the biggest problems I see is wobbly knee syndrome. When the knees kind of become knock-kneed and they follow the midline of the body, you don't want that. You want that straight line of power from your foot to your knee to your hip, just in a straight line. So to do this, make sure you're doing the glute activation movements in the Renegade warm-up, which is in the Prolific Shooting Training Program. It's what we begin every workout with, and that's why it's so important. When you activate your glutes, the hips are going to be a lot more stable, and therefore your knees are going to be in a position of power. And you have to remember that nothing is an island, right? So when you activate a joint, it's going to pull everything else in line. So when you activate your glutes, your knees come in line, and you'll be doing a lot better with that. So make sure that if you have to take some video of it, make sure you do that, and make sure that your knees are not coming towards the midline of your body. You don't have that wobbly knee syndrome. You're straight up and down, and you have a really direct line of power. Now, next is the hips. And again, the hips are going to follow the feet. And you can see that the hips need to be squared to the hoop. And I've put a picture right there of an example. When I shot, I actually turned my hips to the side, and so that you could see that that one hip is not square to the hoop. So your hip needs to be, obviously, both hips level and square to the hoop. Because the shoulders will follow the hips, as we know. If your hip on the right side is turned to the front, your shoulder is also going to turn to the front and throw off the path of the ball. So you really need to, again, square your hips to the basket. And to do this, again, just make sure your feet are square to the basket, and then your hips are going to be square. And do not turn your hips in the air. I see that a lot with players who aren't very strong and they need to get a little bit more power under the ball. They turn their hips to get that extra momentum. You don't want to be doing that, okay? Again, it's going to feel a little awkward to be square up to the hoop, but you need to make sure that you are, and working on that for at least, a week to a month to get used to it, and then your shot is going to hit a whole new level, okay, of consistency, accuracy, everything. Day after day, you're just going to be hitting all of your shots, so that's what you want. Next is the shoulders, and I've shown you, when my hip is back a little bit, that forces the shoulder back. So now we're not quite square with the hoop, and again, square shoulders equals a straight ball path. So you need everything square to the hoop, and the ball momentum is going to be dragged in the direction that the shoulders turn. So if in this picture my left shoulder is back a little bit, the right shoulder moves forward, and that in turn makes my arm go to the left. So obviously you got to get your shoulders square to the hoop. I don't mean to harp on this over and over, square to the hoop, but that is the most important thing. So again, get your feet square, your hips square, your shoulders square, your knees straight up and down, and you'll be in good shape. Next is the elbow, and this is where we get into kind of a different arena here. When everything's square to the hoop, you're going to be in good position, but you really need to get your elbow in the shooting pocket. And I say as square to the hoop as you can make it, because typically when you try to square your elbow to the hoop, it's not going to ever be perfect. It'll just be slightly out to the side. And you can see in that far right picture, my elbow is a little bit out to the side, not too much. And that's about as good as it gets. So make sure you're trying as hard as you can to get your elbow straight, and then it will become about as straight as it can make it. And that will create, again, that straight line of precision. If you drew a line from my foot to my knee to my hip to my shoulder through my elbow and up into the ball, it'd be fairly straight, and that's what you're looking for. Next, you need that roughly 90-degree shooting pocket. You can see myself and the picture of Kobe Bryant. We have about 90 degrees for the shooting pocket, and that's where you want to make it. Some people call this the C, and that's because your hand, your forearm, and your upper arm form a C. So that's what you want to essentially be creating whenever you do this, right? So that's, again, the shooting pocket has to be in that C formation, and it really is really key. It's kind of a sign that a player can really shoot the basketball. So if a coach comes in and he can see that perfect shooting pocket, he's going to say, okay, this player, has spent some time in the gym. They've spent some time mastering the jump shot, and that's really what you need to be doing. So make sure that that elbow is at a straight 90-degree angle, square to the hoop. And to do this, take a look at the feel warm-up in your program. There's going to be a one-hand form shooting drill. This will really, really help with getting your elbow straight, so I definitely recommend that. Now, next is the release, and the hands are pretty simple. All you need to do is follow that shooter's T, as you can see in the bottom, and the two-finger rule. Now, the shooter's T is quite simply your thumbs form a T, and you can see that obviously in the bottom picture, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that. You can see where your hands are supposed to be positioned on the ball. Obviously, everybody knows that. But the two-finger rule is essentially when you're holding the ball up in the pocket, as you can see in the upper picture, you should be able to slide two fingers between your palm and the ball. And that is ensuring that the ball is positioned on your finger pads instead of down on your palm. And from your finger pads, you're just going to get much better feel and better release on the ball. And you want, again, your hands to be somewhat tight but comfortable. And I always say control. Your hands are always in control. So you can palm the ball. If you've seen Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant play, they can shot fake with one hand because they're palming the ball and they have that control. And then in the next motion, they can go up into their jump shot. That should be kind of your goal, to have that tight grip on the ball but comfortable, right? You can still get a great release on it, and that's really where you want to be. The next part of the release is obviously the follow through, and you want to shoot with your strong hand, not your offhand. I see a lot of players sometimes who are weaker shooting with their offhand as well, and it's a two-handed shot, and it just is not a good jumper. You never see a player in the NBA shooting like that, except for maybe Sean Marion. But in any case, shoot with your strong hand, not your offhand, and this should go without saying, but you should be able to essentially, I say the one hand rule, remember, you should be able to essentially shoot with one hand from anywhere on the court that you can shoot with two hands. You should be able to shoot with one hand. So the offhand is for support only. It's supporting the ball as it goes through the shooting motion. It's not shooting the ball. Aside from that, just basic stuff. You need a full wrist flick. You can see in that picture, the top picture, you can see kind of my wrist as a reference point. That's where you want to be. That hand in the cookie jar thing that coaches have been saying for years, that's what you want to do. Hand dips into the cookie jar, which is the hoop. The wrist flicks all the way down and fingers are pointed down directly into the hoop. So the next and maybe the most important part of the release is that the ball rolls off your index finger. Now we talk about that line of precision, and the last point of contact in that line of precision is your index finger. The index finger has to be pointed directly at the basket, and you can see that picture of Larry Bird below. He's kind of famous for that in the three-point contest. He shot the ball, and it was really obvious if you can look at the footage of that. The last shot, it released right off of his index finger, and he pointed it right at the hoop. The ball went in, and he raised that index finger up. As you know, that number one signifying that he's number one. But the ball should always roll off your index finger because it's the most direct path straight to the hoop. And again, all this stuff is going to feel weird at first, okay? You're going to go into the gym and you're going to be probably missing a bunch of shots for the first couple days until you really get used to it. That's obvious. You have to fight through that period and get through that and start making shots once you get used to it. And after you get through that period, you're going to be a lot more, just a lot more consistent in your jump shooting. Next is the eyes, and I hear this a lot, where do I look? And I can tell you right up, I've never met a great shooter who can tell me where they look when they shoot. And I don't know why this is to this day, but I always tell players who still need some guidance in this area, the sweet spot is the cylinder, because if you look at the back of the rim, you hit the back of the rim. If you look at the front of the rim, you hit the front of the rim. The sweet spot is probably that cylinder, that circle in the middle of the hoop. You want to be aiming for that. But at the same time, I can tell you that I've never met a great shooter who can tell me where they look when they shoot, and I don't know why this is. I can't tell you where I look, because sometimes I'm shooting without even looking at the hoop in games, and I'm knocking down shots because in my mind's eye, I've just done it thousands of times and I know where I'm shooting. So I don't know why that is, but I can tell you straight up that's kind of something that the pros know, that we don't know where we look when we shoot. It's not the front of the rim, it's not the back of the rim. If anything, it's the cylinder. But again, I know players who are coming off screens, they got a hand in their face, they just know in their mind's eye where they're shooting the ball. And the only way that you can do this is to get into the gym, okay? Put up a ton of shots and you're going to learn what works for you. I always tell players, if you shoot the ball enough, if you train enough, you're going to figure out what works for you. And I always get emails, from over-analyzing players asking, this is just an example of an outrageous question. What happens if my elbow is 91 degrees instead of 90, but only when I shoot off screens, and when I follow through, my wrist angle doesn't line up with the inside of my big toe? And you should see some of the emails I get from players who literally sit at their computer instead of being in the gym asking questions like these ones that are not significant. They're not important at all. Right? If you get into the gym, you're going to figure out what works for you. If you put in the time, you're going to get there. No shooter's mechanics are perfect, and you need to remember that. No shooter's mechanics are perfect, but if you can do all those principles, work on all those mechanics and figure it out, spend a month in the gym perfecting your mechanics, you're going to get there and you're going to realize what works for you. And, I always say to players, stop being a keyboard player, be an in the gym player. Get in the gym and shoot the ball, put up hundreds and hundreds of shots, and you're going to figure it out. Do the prolific shooting program, follow those drills because they'll teach you proper mechanics. Don't rely on somebody else's view of what should be correct in your mechanics. Get in the gym and figure it out for yourself and train yourself to have those perfect mechanics. So again, you have to get in the gym to understand this. No amount of reading and researching can really do it for you. The bottom line is follow the principles that are in this video and then get in the gym, work on them for yourself, tweak them where you need to get comfortable for yourself, and then master them. That's what all the great players of all time have done. I mean, you don't see Kobe Bryant or Reggie Miller or Ray Allen asking questions like that, right? They shoot the same way over and over and over because it's what works for them, okay? So again, that's how you develop the perfect jumper. I wish you the best of luck. Continue, again, training harder and harder and harder, putting up more and more shots, and mastering those perfect mechanics that you learned in this video, and you will be successful. Okay, so again, I wish you the best of luck. Continue making your way through the prolific shooting program, and I can't wait to hear all about your results. I'll talk to you soon.